The show Heels follows the Duffy Wrestling League, or more specifically, the Spade family. You've got Jack Spade, who is running everything, including being the head writer, and the champion, who is a heel/bad guy. His brother Ace is the main babyface, aka the main good guy. The Duffy Wrestling League is run out of Duffy, Georgia, a small, rundown town with not a lot going on. And the DWL is seen as a regional promotion, but it's definitely seen better days. The DWL was formed by Jack and Ace's father, Tom, who is known as King Spade, but King Spade unfortunately killed himself and left his business to Jack and also his business partner, Willie. Their latest card sees Jack beat a guy named Big Jim to regain his championship. But as Jack is ripping the crowd, in comes Ace to save the day, kick Jack out of the ring, challenge him to a fight. They agree that next week's match will be for the championship and it'll be the headliner. But as Jack is walking away, Ace says, "Hey Jack, fuck you." And there's a massive pop from the crowd, but Jack is not happy at all. When Ace gets to the backstage, he tells him, "Dude, there are kids here." But all Ace cares about is the reaction he got from the crowd, which was pretty big. They loved it. Fast forward to the next week, Jack has to start worrying about the match. He needs to write it all down. But his wife Stacy comes in and wants to know when he's going to be heading to church with them. This morphs into a little bit of a squabble about the latest purchase by Jack, smoke machines. Stacy's a stay-at-home mom, and she penny pinches everything, trying to stretch their dollar as far as it can go. Well, with Jack buying such things as smoke machines, she feels like she can't win in this battle to keep a roof over their head. Jack, however, views it as the DWL needs it, and if the DWL needs it, we need it. The group then does head off to church. They meet up with Jack's mom, and even Ace makes an appearance. But in wrestling, they have something called kayfabe, meaning that if you're out in the public, you have to act like your gimmick is real. And because of that, Jack doesn't want to be seen in the same place as his brother because in the ring, they're supposed to be enemies. So after church is done, Jack goes and waits in the car. Ace's mom, Big Jim, and his pregnant wife, Melanie. They start discussing kayfabe, and Melanie doesn't really understand it. She even goes as far as to use the F word, fake, because wrestling isn't fake, it's scripted. But even after explaining it, Melanie just thinks it's all pretty ridiculous because the crowd knows that it's scripted, so why do you have to pretend outside that you guys really hate each other? But that's the business. After church, though, they have to head over to the DWL arena, and in reality, it's just a really run-down barn. All the wrestlers that will be performing on the card there tonight are there already. You've got Apocalypse, Diego Cottonmouth, Rooster Robbins, and Bobby Pins. And one of the valets named Crystal is watching from above. Rooster starts complaining that he's torn every ligament in his knee and he still thinks he's the best wrestler, so why is Ace in the main event? Apocalypse reminds him that quitting is always an option, but Rooster says, "I can't quit, you guys need me." He starts practicing some moves with Bobby, and Bobby's pretty new to the business, so when Rooster says, "All right, get to the top rope and do an elbow drop on me, I'll teach you how to sell it," Bobby does it, but he's kind of scared. He ends up executing the elbow drop, but Rooster sells it all right. He really sells it. And that's because Rooster's really hurt. Bobby didn't execute the move correctly, which Crystal yells up from the rafters. You need to shift your weight to your knee and not your elbow. As the openers and mid-card guys start practicing, Jack shows up and Willie walks up and asks if he's finished the script or not. She happens to think that Ace should win because of the fact that that's why they have a packed house there tonight. But Jack hasn't finished the script and he's not so sure about that. They also have an issue of a rival promotion named Florida Wrestling Dystopia. Their owner, Charlie Gully, has been crapping all over them in videos, going so far as to say that you'll have free admission if you vow to never go to a DWL event again. Jack tries to put it to the side like it's nothing, but Willie reminds him that they're packing out places all over North Florida, so there is a reason to be concerned. And a packed house is something they could actually use a lot because they have issues all over the place. They don't pay their wrestlers that well. The roof needs fixing. Willie's also very concerned that after tonight, they might have a problem getting people back because they've been building up to Ace versus Jack for a long time. Jack, however, points out that his latest match against Big Jim has over 10,000 views online. Because of this, he tells her, "We've got heat. Heat that the DWL hasn't had since Dad versus Wild Bill. But what we really need to do is upgrade our cameras," which Willie knows that Stacy is not going to approve of. But once again, what's good for DWL is good for Stacy, or so Jack convinces himself. Now, the last two guys to show up for practice are Ace and Big Jim. Big Jim gave Ace a ride over to the DWL barn, but right before they got there, they stopped off at a convenience store, and Ace said some pretty nasty stuff to the girl behind the counter. This is one of those towns where everybody knows everybody, so when she said something about Ace's dad being disappointed in him because he was caught stealing gum, he decided to make fun of her weight. Pretty mean. She told her dad called up Jack, and now Jack has to deal with the fact that his brother, who's supposed to be the good guy, is out there making people cry. As Ace and Big Jim get there, Jack is in the ring going over the outcomes of that night's card. But when he gets to the main event, he says that he will retain the title by pinfall, which surprises pretty much everybody. They figured that it was going to be Ace's night, including Ace. As soon as everybody goes their separate ways, Ace runs after Jack and demands to know why he's not getting the belt. Jack explains that Charlie Gully's Florida Dystopia Wrestling is breathing down their neck, so he's got to keep the fan base interested and engaged. The way to do that is to do the unexpected. Everybody's expecting Ace to win, so what they do is they have Jack win. This way, it'll force Ace to fight his way back to the title picture. But more importantly, it'll keep the fans engaged for a month, maybe 2. Jack starts waxing poetic about the story that he's telling the audience, but Ace screams at him that it's grown men in costumes pretending to hit each other. It's supposed to be fun, but Jack says not at the expense of being good. Jack then brings up the whole making a girl cry fiasco before practice, and once again hammers home that people need to believe he's a good guy. The problem is, Ace already believes he's a good guy. Ace heads back to the locker room, and he's standing in front of his locker pissed off when his valet, Crystal, walks in. She tries to make him feel better by reminding him it's just a belt, and then starts going over the finish. Ace, though, can't believe that he's really not going to be named champion. In another effort to make him feel better, Crystal says, I've been watching matches here since I was little, and sometimes losing is the best way to win over a crowd. She brings up that when Ace was in high school, he was the star quarterback who threw an interception in overtime to lose the championship. When Ace did that, he was on the field, he was crying, and there was something about seeing him vulnerable on the field that made Crystal feel for Ace in that time. But there's another thing that Ace can do to make Crystal feel for him. Hook up with him. The two start banging it out in the locker room. A couple hours later, Jack comes back to the barn, and Willie tells him, hey, we got a visitor. And that's because an old DWL legend, Wild Bill, has returned. He's a guy who made it out of Duffy and actually made it to the big time. Now he works as a talent scout for one of those big-time promotions. When Jack gets alone with him in his office, Bill tells him that he's not there to just think about the good old days. He's there because of Ace. Powers that be think that he really could be something. Jack says to Bill he's a kid, and he hasn't even mastered this level yet. But Bill cuts him off and says, yeah, but the way that this kid pops in the crowd, he's a natural. I've seen those videos you put out. Jack kind of chuckles to himself and says he's not going to leave what we're building here, but Bill tells him, I left, and then I came back here this morning on a Learjet. I mean, after all, what are you even trying to resurrect here anyway? Jack starts telling Bill how he's going to resurrect the DWL. People are already responding to what he's doing. And Bill reminds him that a couple weeks ago they did a show at the Golden Corral Buffet. And this is the problem with their relationship. Jack looks at Bill like a guy who got out but never came back to help out. And Bill looks at Jack like a guy who is simply delusional. Bill walks out of the office and finds Ace and lets him know that they are indeed scouting him. But before that night's show, Ace wants to go over the finish with Jack. He wants to see if he can maybe salvage it. Him and Crystal have come up with a really good idea where Ace continues to drop kick him over and over and Jack continues to kick out. Until eventually, it's just one super kick too many and he has to give up the belt. Jack, though, is totally turned off by this idea when he finds out that it was Crystal who actually came up with it. He looks at her like nothing more than a valet, which is a trend in the DWL. He looks at Willie, who says, I don't hate the idea. But then he asks Big Jim what he thinks, and Big Jim says, it just feels like this is the end of something. And that's because in Ace's mind, it is. He admits, yeah, I mean, if Bill likes what he sees, I'm going to be out of here. But Jack tells him that the finish will remain the same, and if he wants a title belt, he's going to have to stick around and earn it, like everybody else has. Ace storms out of the barn and is standing outside with Crystal, and Billy rolls up and asks if he can speak to Ace alone. They drive off to have a private conversation, and Ace is asking Bill if there's anything specific that they're looking for so he can get signed. But it's the same stuff that got them to look at Ace in the first place, being that superstar. Bill then pops an Oxycontin and throws it to Ace, and Ace doesn't really want to take it because it always messes him up, but Bill reminds him, yeah man, that's the point. So Ace puts the pills in his pocket for later. Bill then asks what's the deal with Crystal, and Ace tells him that she's the valet, and Bill responds with, we can get you a hotter one, definitely a taller one for sure. The conversation then gets to Jack, and Bill says that Jack is a know-it-all who doesn't know anything. If Jack was half as smart as he thinks, he would realize that it's not about sticking to rigid scripts, it's about being adaptable. Bill then hands Ace a 2x4, which he carved the words, long live the king into it. It's an old staple from Ace's father. He then tells him, baby brother's in charge now. Now, while these two are talking, Jack is going off to find Big Jim, and he finds him at the very top of a water tower. He starts pitching Jim on a finish where Jim is going to run in and turn heel. It's going to be like a double cross. But the thing is, Jim doesn't want to turn heel. He doesn't like the idea of people booing him. Jack tries to convince him that it's the right move to do and tells him that eventually he'll turn back. But Jim turns to him and says, Jack, I'm retiring. Melanie's pregnant and she doesn't get what we do. Plus, if I'm not wrestling, I can pick up more shifts and maybe one day I can be a manager. If you really want me to turn heel tonight, I'll do it, but tonight's my final show. And Jack says, no, it's fine. But now he's got an issue because he's about to be down two of his most popular wrestlers, Ace and Big Jim. He gets down from the water tower and heads back into his office, where Ace comes in and makes one final pitch for him to win the belt. But Jack is still hung up on the fact that Crystal came up with this finish, even though it's really good. Ace kind of throws his hands up and says, I just want my picture on the wall of champions right next to you and Dad. And Jack says, well, then why are you leaving? But Ace shoots back, who won it? I mean, why can't you just be happy for me? They get into a whole argument about whether or not Jack's happy for him or whether he's just trying to keep his baby brother under his thumb. Ace feels like Jack's being bitter. Jack feels like his brother is leaving before they finish what they started. It then morphs into what the crowd of autograph seekers outside is cheering for. Are they cheering for the character or are they cheering for Ace? Jack feeling like he created that character, Ace feeling like he perfected the character. This conversation, though, is getting nowhere, so Ace just leaves and goes to sign autographs with his fans. Shortly after the autograph signing, though, it's time to actually get dressed. Crystal, who's a valet, ends up sneaking into the locker room, where Willie ends up catching her and yelling at her for it, saying, you're a valet, you're not a wrestler. But Crystal says, no, I'm more than a valet, I am a wrestler. And this has been a common trend, with Willie and Jack trying to keep Crystal in her lane, and Crystal wanting to branch out. Crystal, though, has a lot to think about, because she's about to be a valet for a guy who might skip town, and she doesn't know if she's coming with. And that guy, being Ace, is outside in the parking lot snorting an oxy when Bill walks up to him and hands him the 2x4 and says, long live the king. It's then showtime. Everybody goes out, has their matches, gets the crowd riled up for the main event. But before Jack goes out, Stacy walks up to him because Jack made some more purchases she doesn't agree with. This time, a bunch of GoPro cameras. And for the 100th time, he says, well, if it's good for the DWL, it's good for you. But Jack Spade isn't the only person having a conversation with the female in his life, because as Ace is waiting by the curtain, Crystal finally asks the question, are you taking me when you leave? But Ace doesn't answer the question, and the two are interrupted when Jack walks up. As they're standing there waiting to go out, Ace tells Jack, I'm going to go wrestle the match of my life, and just like you said, I get to leave and you stay here forever. So you end up killing yourself just like Dad did. And both guys start choking each other. Apocalypse comes and breaks it up, and Big Jim comes to the curtain and gives everybody a hug. He has no idea that these two are about to come to blows. But then Jack's music hits. He goes out to the ring, and then it's Ace's turn. He goes out with the 2x4. The crowd is riled up. The whole backstage ends up coming to the curtain to watch it. They feel like this match is about to be epic. There's a true energy in the room as Bill is up in the rafters watching it. But shortly after the bell rings, Jack ambushes Ace, suplexes him, and puts him in a hold where he's got his one arm pinned to the ground and he's wrenching on his shoulder. The ref actually tells Jack, you're going to end up legitimately hurting Ace. And Jack says, well, then I guess you're going to have to call it. Ace is writhing in pain, and finally the ref does end up calling the bell. And everybody in the barn is just shocked at what they just paid for. When Ace finally gets up, he realized what Jack just did. He kept Ace from being able to show off what he could do in the ring for Bill, thus keeping him in Duffy. And he punches him in the face. The fans, meanwhile, are pissed off that they just wasted money on this, and they start pelting both guys with popcorn, sodas, beers. It's a really bad look for the DWL. But it looks like Jack's going to get his way, because he keeps the belt and he keeps his brother in town. In episode 2, the fallout from Jack and Ace's match is still very fresh. It's pretty much all the locker room can talk about. That is, when they're not watching Charlie Gully's latest hit piece on the DWL. Willie comes in and lets him know that she hasn't gotten the script from Jack, which immediately prompts Rooster to ask, well, if this wasn't a part of the script, then why did he do Ace like that? Apocalypse tries to reassure the room that everything's going to be fine, but Rooster says no. If he does that to his brother, what's going to happen when one of us gets a shot at the title? And Rooster has a point. I mean, Jack and Ace haven't spoken since that day. Jack just continues to go to his job that he hates, selling lawn equipment, to his snot-nosed brat who is lucky enough to take over his father's store. And Ace is spending his day sleeping with Crystal, leaving voicemail after voicemail for Wild Bill to no avail. Eventually, though, Crystal and Ace do have to come out of Ace's room, and Crystal starts to walk out the door to head home, but Carol, Ace's mom, chases after her outside and asks, hey, how's he doing? And Crystal doesn't really have an answer for her. And Carol says, you mean to tell me that you spent the entire day with him, having sex with him, in my house so loud that I could hear, and you never once thought to ask him how he's doing? If you actually care about him, you're just going to leave him alone. And Crystal says, no, we're partners. But Carol reminds her that's fake. That's scripted. So tell Jack and Willie that Ace is going to make a clean break. Start building a regular life for himself. And the only thing Crystal says back is, Ace is really lucky his mom cares so much. Let me know if you need anything. And then she heads home, where when she does get home, she plays with her two little brothers on a trampoline, pretending to be wrestlers. Now, with Crystal home, the other woman in the DWL, Willie, heads to a diner to meet with Charlie Gully, who called her up and wanted to have a chat. He wants to buy the DWL dome, or barn, or arena, whatever you want to call it. He needs it for his, quote, ever-expanding empire. Willie tells him it's not for sale, but he reminds her that Jack's behind on a lot of bills and this would be a bailout for him. He even offers Willie a job. But it turns out this is really personal for Charlie Gully. Jack went on a couple of podcasts and just totally shit all over his name. So Charlie Gully wants nothing more than to run Jack out of business, take him over. He tells Willie that before Jack said those disparaging comments, he was just kind of skating by. But when Jack did say those disparaging comments, it lit a fire under him to take him out. This somehow sparks a debate on whose show's better, with Willie saying that the DWL is better, and that's why they're the main competition, even though they have a fifth of the budget that Charlie Gully's show has. As Willie lights a victory cigarette after pointing that out, Charlie Gully tells her, you should jump ship before you go down with it. And that is when Willie heads off. On the way home, she does call up Jack and tell him about Charlie Gully's offer. And right away, Jack's like, screw that guy, but then he wants to know for how much. And Willie says, it doesn't matter. We're not selling, but I do need the script for next show because last week was a shit show. All of a sudden, Jack goes from wanting to know how much Charlie Gully was offering to trying to convince himself that the offer to buy the dome is because Charlie Gully's scared of how successful the DWL has been recently. Willie then asks if him and Ace have patched things up, but the only thing that Jack will say is that Ace isn't on the card. And to check her email, the script will be there eventually. That night, as Jack is getting ready for bed, still having not written the script, Stacy tells him that he might need to consider just taking a break. He's running himself ragged. Maybe spend some time with his son, Thomas. There's also a lot of house stuff to do. They have squirrels in the attic and the grass is overgrown. But that's not something that Jack's looking for with Charlie Gully's promotion breathing down their neck. He can't take his foot off the gas. Stacy then asks Jack if he's been able to get in touch with Ace. She went over to Ace's place the other day, but he wouldn't come out of his room. And Jack says, I don't really want to talk about it. But Stacy needs some answers. She still has no idea why Jack did what he did. But Jack is adamant that he doesn't want to talk about it. Stacy thinks that he should apologize, but Jack says, I did what I did for his own good. And she is dumbfounded at that ridiculous response. She says, you have to cancel the next show until you can actually fix things with your brother. She brings up the fact that he needs to apologize because he's his brother, not because he needs him for wrestling. And the fact that he almost cost him one shot, and it might be the only shot he ever gets, is eventually going to eat him up. Jack tells her, I can't cancel the show. There are people that rely on this to make their income. But Stacy says, nobody makes their living off wrestling anymore. And Jack takes offense to it, saying, well, I can. This ends up resulting in Stacy sleeping on the couch. This is not exactly how Jack wanted his night to go. But the other Spade brother isn't having a good night also. He finally gets Wild Bill to call him back, but it's not the call he's been looking for. Wild Bill tells him that there is no development deal. After Ace broke down in the ring, he kind of cost himself that. It wasn't a good look. The video's gone viral. And Wild Bill tells Ace, you always have to be on. In that moment, you weren't on. The advice that Wild Bill gives him is to latch on with a rival promotion because it's clear that his brother was holding him back. And the one that he suggests is Charlie Gully's. Now, he does try to give him some words of encouragement, bringing up how young Ace is, and this probably won't be the last opportunity, but because this call did not go the way that Ace expected, it drives Ace right to the bottle. And when Carol goes to check on Ace later that night and notices that he's gone, she panics. And she calls up Jack and wakes him up in the middle of the night, but also calls Crystal. Jack goes inside and notices that Ace's sock drawer is open, and that's always where he taught him to keep his whiskey, so he figures that he's just going off a bender and he needs to find him. He hops in his truck and Crystal hops right in there with him. And Jack isn't quite sure why, but Crystal says, well, maybe I can help you, and I definitely don't want to stay here with her, meaning Carol. So, like it or not, Crystal's coming with, and Jack and Crystal head off to try to find Ace. Now, the first place they're going to check is this field that Jack used to take Ace when his father got drunk and started kind of acting up. They used to go there to just forget about things. But when they get there, there is no Ace. He continues to look, and then he gets a phone call from Rooster because Ace stumbled into the sports bar that Rooster hosts karaoke at. And it's pretty obvious that Ace is in a bad spot. He's taking shots, and he was already drunk when he showed up, so it's only going to get worse. So Rooster calls up Jack to let him know that his brother's there. But when Jack and Crystal show up, Ace is on the stage with the microphone, getting into it with the crowd. There's one guy in particular from high school that he knows that is really giving it to Ace. Ace is trying to give it back. Eventually, though, Ace just starts singing, but he's so bad at it. And everyone's kind of talking about how embarrassing this moment is for him. On top of that, everybody in the bar knows what happened last week at the show. This prompts Ace to just stop and yell, "Would you guys shut the fuck up?" He then starts ripping the crowd for being small town people that are never going to get out of Duffy. The guy from high school then yells, "Get off the stage!" And Ace to respond with, "Why don't you try to make me?" They get into each other's faces, but Rooster tries to break it up. And Rooster succeeded until the high school guy says that Ace can only fight when it's fake. And that's when Ace just jumps at the guy. But because he's drunk, the guy easily avoids Ace. That's when Jack steps up and tries to pick his brother up. But the guy from high school can't help himself and he starts ripping Ace and Jack. And Jack isn't drunk. So he starts tuning this guy up pretty good. And all of a sudden you got both Spade brothers forming a tag team against all these meatheads in the bar. They end up getting kicked out. But Rooster is pissed. He yells at Ace, "God damn it, man. This is how I make a living. I need this money." And Jack steps in and reassures him, "Don't worry, we'll pay for everything. We apologize." At this point, that high school meathead has followed them out and yells, "Why don't you go back to your mom's house, you losers?" And Ace wants another crack at the guy, but Jack says, "Nah, man, it ain't worth it. Let's go." And that's when the guy from high school says, "Yeah, that's what I thought. You guys are just a bunch of pussies like your old man." And neither Jack or Ace are about to let that slide. But before they can step in, Crystal hits the guy with a Hurricane Rana. And then she stands up and says, "All right, let's go." And Crystal, Jack, and Ace drive back to Carol's place. And Ace is pumped. He yells at Jack, "Dude, did you see the look on people's faces? They didn't know what to think of us as a tag team." And Crystal starts asking Jack what he thought of her finisher, but Jack doesn't really answer either of them. They stop off to get some food, and on the drive over to Carol's, Jack tells Ace that Melanie went into labor, and he'll take him over there tomorrow to meet Big Jim's baby. They get to Carol's place, and Jack throws Ace on the bed, and at this point, the excitement of the fight is worn off. And as Jack is ready to turn around and leave, Ace says, "Hey, by the way, I fucking hate you. You act like you're some kind of genius, but you're not. You're just a lawnmower salesman, and you ruined my fucking life." Not much really to say to that, so Jack walks out, and Crystal turns to him and says, "All right, I'll see you," but Jack says, "No, here," and hands her some dip, which is so gross, but Crystal takes some anyway. Crystal tells Jack that everything that happened with the last show, it was such a dick move, but she thought for the story and the character, it was actually genius. And after seeing him at the bar tonight, he'd make a great heel. Jack then heads home, and Stacy was waiting up for him, and she wants to know how he got his black eye, but he says, well, it was Ace, but it wasn't him, but it was because of him. As she puts some frozen peas on his head, that's when he tells her Charlie Gully wants to buy the dome, and it might be time. When you find out that your husband's about to sell that dilapidated barn, it's time to have sex, and that's what they do. The next day, Jack wakes up, and him, Stacy, Thomas head to the hospital to meet Big Jim's child. But right before they go up, Jack pulls Stacy to the side and asks, should I sell the dome? And Stacy says, Jack, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. We just want you to spend more time with us. They then go to look and find out what room Melanie and Jim are in. The rest of the DWL is in the gift shop trying to find the new baby a gift, but most of them are watching the new Charlie Gully promotion, which is ripping the DWL as per usual. And the flashy lights of the DWL and all the people and the pyrotechnics, it's got Rooster's attention for sure. Rooster says that if Charlie Gully ends up talking to any of them, they have to take his call, right? But that's not the way that Apocalypse sees it at all. Apocalypse is extremely loyal to the DWL. They made him champion, and then he got into drugs and alcohol and had to go to rehab. And when he got out of rehab, the DWL took him back. Because they took him back, he's been extremely loyal to the entire Spade family for giving him a second chance. He tells Rooster, if you have a problem with what Jack is doing, go talk to him. He's not a mind reader. And Rooster says, okay, out of respect for you, I'll do that. They then head up and they meet with Jack and Stacy. But when Jack gets up there, he notices that Charlie Gully sent Big Jim flowers, even though Big Jim is retired. Before he can even really focus on the fact that his rival is sending one of his big promotional stars flowers, Carol walks in and says that Ace won't come up because of what Jack did last week, embarrassing him. So Jack has to go outside and talk to Ace, finally, man-to-man about what happened. He starts off by telling Ace, you're right. I'm a lawnmower salesman, and I have Stacy and Thomas, and they're perfect. And you're an unemployed, washed-up quarterback who couldn't play in college. That's all we are without wrestling. He starts telling Ace that the family needs him. The wrestlers need him. Everybody needs him. And Ace tells Jack, I'm going to get scouted again, and this time it's going to stick. I also want to say on my character and the storylines. And when Wild Bill comes back, and Jack cuts him off and says, I will support you. Now that the two have seemingly buried the hatchet, they head upstairs and they meet Big Jim's new child. But the next day, that script still needs to be written. So when Jack heads into work, he is not interested in selling any lawnmowers. He opens his laptop and starts writing. But back home, there was all that stuff that needed to be done, and Stacy's sick of waiting for it. So she takes care of the squirrels, and she starts mowing the lawn like a boss. In episode 3, that week's show will be headlined by Ace going up against Bobby. It will also feature a veteran wrestler named Ricky Rabies, who they're paying a substantial amount of money to show up and kind of bring in some people. They definitely need butts in the seats after the debacle that was Ace's last show. Ricky's going to go up against Jack. But before Ace can headline this show, he needs to address the crowd. And as the people are filing in, he's in the back practicing this speech about how he was double-crossed by his brother and how Duffy people get back up. It's very drink your milk, take your vitamins. Crystal is standing there as Ace starts to practice his speech, and she gently massages it in there that maybe he should take a different angle. Jack, however, interrupts the two and says, I want to change a thing, and then has to talk to Ace alone. The two start talking about this promo that he's going to cut, because it turns out that Ace didn't write it. Jack did. And Ace loves it. He just wants to tweak some things, like wipe away your tears. He wants to change to chugging a beer. Their conversation ends up getting interrupted by Willie, who lets Jack know that one of the sponsors is in his office and needs to talk to him. Before he goes off and deals with that, though, he grabs Ace and says, hey, hold on a minute. I never got to apologize for what went down during that match. Ace, however, doesn't really want to talk about it, but Jack says, you need to hear it from me. I know everybody's dream is to go up north and make it big, but I don't think you realize what it's like to rely on a corporation to make your living. I mean, you could spend years in developmental and then they just let you go because you're a pawn up there. And here at the DWL, with what we're building, which, by the way, is because of you, here you can be a partner and you can be a big star. You don't need them. And Ace doesn't really say much. He just nods. Jack then goes and catches up with Willie, who gets a weird phone call from Wild Bill, but she figures it's just a drunk dial. He gets an update on ticket sales, which are going really good, so he gives himself a little pat on the back for booking Ricky Rabies. Before he goes and talks to this sponsor, though, they start discussing the fact that they're going to pull the curtain back during Ace's promo. Let the audience in on the fact that it was, in fact, a double cross. Willie doesn't think it's a good idea, and Jack says that's an old-school approach because they know that it's scripted. Everybody over the age of 10 knows that it's scripted, so if they know, why don't we just acknowledge it? Ace then heads up to say hello to the sponsor, and down in the locker room, the guys are celebrating with Bobby a little bit on his first main event booking. When directly outside of the locker room, Ace is a little hesitant to go in. He doesn't know how the reception's going to be. Crystal tries to give him a little pep talk, but he brushes it aside, and turns out she was right, because when Ace enters the locker room, everybody welcomes him back, like nothing happened. There's one person, though, that is not excited for either Ace or Bobby, and that's Rooster. He's pissed off that a guy who had to learn an elbow drop a week ago is now main eventing this show. Ace ends up walking up to Rooster and says, what's your problem, man? But Rooster just points out that Ace's boots don't have any scuffs on them, which is a wrestling insult, and then he just walks off. Ace then gets word that Ricky Rabies has shown up, and Jack wants him to meet him, so he heads up to the office, and he meets Ricky Rabies, Ricky's valet, Vicky Rabies, and Ricky's son. But after everybody thanks Ricky for coming, Ace pulls Jack aside, because he didn't actually know that Ricky Rabies was booked for the show. He thought the show was built around Ace's quote-unquote comeback. So he's a little pissed off. He yells at Jack, it doesn't matter what you put on the poster. If you're wrestling Ricky Rabies, that is the main event. Jack reassures him, though, that at his age, Ricky is nothing more than an opening act. He's a name to get people in the door. That's it. They're here for him. They see you shine. They come back for you. Look, just focus on your promo. Make them cheer you. And Crystal, who is listening to all this, says, or boo, even. And Ace turns to her like she's nuts. And that's when Vicky Rabies, who had walked back in the room, says, you know, Crystal, I got to make some fake blood, and it's a little bit of a process. Can you help me out a little bit? So the two women head off to make fake blood for Ricky's entrance when Vicky starts explaining to Crystal the importance of being a valet. Really, it just is about making sure that the wrestler is in the best mood possible. She paints the picture that a valet is really nothing more than a traveling secretary who has to make sure the guy is happy. So Crystal heads down, takes this advice, and starts rubbing baby oil all over Ace's body. But as Ace gets ready to go out to finally address the crowd, Rooster is still pissed off. And unfortunately, he's taking it out on Bobby, who is A, too dumb to realize it, and B, not even at fault. Apocalypse points this out, saying, you know it's not his fault, so why are you being a dick? How about instead of being a dick, you just go and do what I tell you to do? Talk to Jack. Rooster starts making excuses, but Apocalypse hammers home that he needs to go and talk to Jack, and deep down, Rooster knows that he's right. All the boys in the back head to the monitor to watch Ace's speech to the crowd. But as soon as he comes out, he starts getting booed, and the boos do not stop. Even as Ace does this whole, you pick yourself back up, you chug a beer speech, he continues to get booed. And then out of nowhere, the crowd starts throwing packets of tissues at him, yelling that he's a baby. In the back, Willie has no idea how all these people got tissues. Turns out, Jack had one of the workers hand them out to people as they were coming into the building. But Ace can't really take it. He ends up hopping out of the ring and storming in the back. When he sees Jack, he chucks tissues at him and says, what the hell was that, Jack? The whole crowd is booing me. And Jack tries to point out, yeah, exactly, the whole crowd is reacting to you. But all Ace can focus on is the boos, not the fact that he's actually getting a reaction, which is 100% the battle in pro wrestling, just getting a reaction. Jack completely steals Crystal's idea and yells at Ace, you would make a really good heel. But Ace has no interest in being a heel whatsoever. He tells Jack, you're the heel, I'm the babyface because Dad was the babyface. And that's when Jack whispers in his ear, yeah, because our dad was such a good guy, he knew you were home. And what he means by that is, when Tom Spade killed himself, he went out for a run, he did some work along the house, and then he casually walked inside, grabbed a handgun, went out to the porch, and blew his brains out. And the only person at home was Ace, who ended up finding his dad. The two go their separate ways, with Ace going into the laundry room and Crystal following suit. She took Vicky's advice to heart once again and ends up helping him blow off some steam. And one of the ways you can do that is by having sex with them. Or so I hear. Now, as the show goes on outside, a couple of people that's shown up are Stacy and 3 of her friends. They're in town for a girls' week, and Stacy had no plans on going to the show that night. But when the waiter of the restaurant that they were at mentions how he couldn't get off work to see the show, and he wants to know the ending, Stacy's friends insist they show up. So she begrudgingly takes them, and they're having a blast. They're blown away that Stacy downplayed this production. So they're in the crowd, watching the show, and waiting for the main event. Jack, however, is also getting prepared for the main event, and as he's walking by the locker room, Rooster asks for a minute, and Jack knows exactly what he wants to talk to him about. So he says, the reason why you're not in the main event is because I needed Bobby. I needed somebody like Bobby. I needed a guy who didn't have much experience and was willing to be whatever for me. And tonight, I need somebody to put Ace over. Look, Rooster, you're the best guy we got in that locker room. And Rooster cuts him off and says, well, then why don't I have a chance at the belt? And Jack tells him it's because it doesn't make sense for the script right now. But when it does, he'll get his title shot. Jack then has to go get dressed and get ready for the main event. I'm sorry, the co-main event, we'll call it. He comes out, and Stacy's friends are blown away that is Stacy's husband. I mean, they know Jack, they just didn't know this side of him. Jack starts doing the heel gimmick, saying if anybody's in the back that wants challenge for the belt, come out. And that's when Ricky Raby's music hits. Him, Vicky, his son, and even a raccoon drone end up coming out to the ring. The raccoon drone ends up spitting blood right into Jack's face. The crowd goes wild, and the match starts. As Jack and Ricky are in the ring riling up the crowd, all the boys in the back are watching the match go down on the monitor when Apocalypse gets a video of Wild Bill on a plane naked, making a fool of himself, and this video has gone viral. There's 2 people, though, that aren't watching the match, and that is Ace and Rooster. Ace heads outside, and he's about to call Big Jim when Rooster, who he had no idea was out there, says, you got to see this video of Wild Bill. Rooster starts talking about the first time he met Wild Bill in his career, and it turns out that Rooster has wrestled in just about every single indie promotion in Georgia. And at one time, he was thought of as the prodigy, but now he's the grizzled old vet who can't even get a title shot. And in his mind, he believes that the reason he hasn't gotten a title shot or a shot at a bigger promotion is because of the fact he's black. He tells Ace, the title belt really stands out against a white backdrop. And I don't know what made me think that anything would be different when Jack took the promotion over. And Ace agrees with him, saying, yeah, I mean, screw Jack. Here I am, a total face, and he wants me to turn heel. But Rooster says, no, that's one thing Jack is right about. I mean, come on. You as a face? No one's believing that anymore. I mean, you cried in the ring. The two continue to talk about Ace's character, bitching about Jack. The problem is, Jack's match wrapped up. And when he gets in the back, he's looking for Ace, but he can't find him. Because of that, he's planning on going back out there and wrestling again. And that's finally when Ace shows up. He sends Bobby out there, but when Ace heads out, he goes full on heel. He beats the crap out of Bobby, and it is shocking to Stacy in the crowd. She has no idea what's going on. The heel turn goes over great, but when Ace gets in the back, he's not in a good mood. Even though he's being congratulated for a job well done, he's pissed off. He yells at Crystal, "Back off, you're not my girlfriend." And then he calls Willie a bitch, and that's a line that Jack isn't willing to let him cross, so he pulls him aside and says, "When exactly did you think it was okay to call Willie a bitch?" But Ace tells Jack, "This is what you wanted. I'm a heel now." And with a stupid comment like that, Jack just walks away. The wrestlers all shower up, start heading home, and Vicky goes to say goodbye to Crystal. And one thing that Crystal is very surprised to learn as Vicky, Ricky, and his son are leaving is the fact that Vicky is not Ricky's wife. He's got a whole other wife named Betty. That was an M. Night Shyamalan-type plot twist that Crystal was not expecting. But before Vicky leaves, she tells her, "Don't let what Ace said bother you. Men can be emotional sometimes," and then gives her a tip on how to stay skinny, because she says staying skinny is everything. Everybody starts heading home. When Willie gets home, there's Wild Bill in her front yard waiting for her, saying how he screwed up. And Stacy said goodbye to her friends and headed home with Jack. But as they're driving to go pick up Thomas, she starts asking about when they can travel, because her friends are flight attendants, and they talked about all the different destinations they're going to with their husbands or boyfriends, and that's something that's very appealing to Stacy. But Jack starts telling her how he can't. The DWL is hanging on by a thread. They don't have the money. He just starts making excuse after excuse, and Stacy's sick of it. And Jack can't quite figure out where this is coming from, because he says, "Hold on. You and your girlfriends came, had a great night, so what's the issue?" And Stacy says the issue is, when the night ended, they got to go, and I had to stay. In episode 4, as Jack is writing the next week's show, all of a sudden the fire alarm goes off. A fire started in Thomas's room, and he has to evacuate the entire family. Now, luckily, there wasn't too much damage, but squirrels ended up eating through the wiring, and because of that, there's going to have to be a lot of work done on the house. Because of this, it starts a little bit of a fight between Jack and Stacy. Stacy knows that the insurance won't cover all of the damage, and she's thinking about getting a job, but Jack doesn't want her to. Jack promises that a bunch of money's about to come into the DWL, you just gotta have faith. But a house fire isn't the only rude awakening for the DWL business side of things, because Willie ends up waking up with Wild Bill in her house. That's because Wild Bill went up to corporate and was sitting in a meeting where they were talking about the new championship belt. Wild Bill absolutely hated it. He got on the next plane, he had the belt with him, got tuned up real good, put the belt on, and ended up getting caught on video screaming about the corporate suits not knowing what the hell they were doing. So because of this, he's in Duffy, laying low, waiting to hear what his punishment's going to be. He doesn't think he's going to be fired, but you can tell that Bill has overstayed his welcome in Willie's house. Willie, though, has to get going because she has to meet up with Jack to go to a business meeting with their main sponsor. This is the opportunity to get the money flowing into the DWL that Jack was talking about. His idea is to convert a bunch of the old tapes that they have from the DWL into digital, put them all on YouTube, generate capital that way. The problem is, the sponsor that he goes to isn't interested. He tells Jack that he just doesn't really see the return on investment. And boy, does this piss off Jack. He really thought he was going to nail down some cash. Willie has to calm him down because he is heated. But Jack is just stressed out because he feels like the walls are closing in on him. She tells Jack to go home and deal with his fire while she has to go deal with hers, i.e. Wild Bill. But when Willie gets home, Wild Bill isn't there. He headed to the bar to blow off some steam where he runs into Ace. Ace didn't really want to talk to Wild Bill, even trying to get out of the conversation by making an excuse, but Wild Bill convinces him to stay and play some pool, hustle some locals. As they're playing pool, Bill starts talking about Ace's new gimmick, the fact that he's a heel, but Ace is not interested at all in talking about wrestling. And Bill says, "So you don't want me telling the big boss about your new gimmick?" And Ace asks him, "They really didn't fire your ass for that." But Bill says, "No, they loved that video. It was a promo. I'm just here taking a little bit of time out as a formality, and I'll be back up there." None of this, by the way, is true. But it's wrestling. Fake it till you make it. Wild Bill then decides to just screw with the guys that they're playing pool with, act like they're cheating, knowing full well that he can just bully them into submission, and it works, but it's kind of messed up. He goes back to Ace after the two yokels leave, and he says, "That's why I'm the best at what I do. And I reckon you have it in you too, just like your dad. He played nice for the crowds, but your dad had a vicious side in him. If you tap that vein, you'll get rich." Now, Ace's valet also had a pretty busy day. Crystal. She was at practice as a bunch of the boys were blowing off steam and she was cutting Bobby's hair. But as Bobby was leaving, he asked her to stop by his trailer, which is parked right outside of the dome. She's a little hesitant to go in, but she's pretty surprised to learn it's really clean. And he says, "Yeah, I can't write music or anything if it's dirty." Turns out Bobby's grandfather gave it to him, and he tries to keep it nice and clean to kind of honor him. But the reason he brought Crystal there that day was to talk about his character, because he doesn't know exactly what his character is. So he wants to pick her brain a little bit. He needs to get the answer quick because they want to keep his feud with Ace going. She tells him, I will help, but I don't know if my taste really suits the DWL. And he completely disagrees, saying, no, you're badass. People respect you. While she appreciates that, she doesn't think that that's true at all. So they work all day together and trying to think of a new character for Bobby Pin. And the thing that they come up with is Bobby 85. It's a throwback to the golden age of wrestling, the 1980s. They end up going to get ice cream that night together, and they end up realizing they have a lot of common interests. She does end up admitting that when he asked her to his trailer, she did think he was going to put a move on her. Bobby kind of laughs it off, saying, you mean a dance move? Problem with Bobby Pin is you don't actually know if he was being serious with that or not. He's not the brightest guy, but he means well, and you see that when a couple of kids run up and ask him for a picture. They also recognize Crystal, but Crystal's hands are full, so she says, I'll catch you at the Dome. But seeing Bobby interact with the kids makes her realize that he's a really good guy. When the kids end up leaving, she says, you're going to make a great face. Ace loved being a face, but he wasn't so good at turning on his smile. I guess now, though, he won't have to. And Ace had a pretty rough night. He went home for dinner with his mom where Jack, Stacy, Thomas came over. And Thomas was doing the prayers when he prayed for his grandfather, who he said was, quote, in heaven. When his grandmother heard that, she started saying, no, your grandfather is not in heaven. He's in hell. She starts going over the reasons why he's in hell, because he committed suicide. And during this lecture a few times, everybody at the table kind of tries to get her to stop until finally Stacy says, Jesus Christ, Carol, give it a rest. It gets super, super awkward. But because of this little lecture, Thomas, who is staying over that night, can't really sleep. So when Ace walks by his room, he starts asking him questions on if his grandfather is actually in hell. Ace, having common sense, tells the kid what he probably needs to hear at the age of 10. No, your grandfather is not on fire. Yes, your grandmother is wrong. No, do not tell your grandmother I said that. But then as Ace is leaving, Thomas asks who cleaned him up, and Ace tells him that Jack did. Thomas then asks if his grandmother was sad, and Ace says she's still sad. Thomas points out that she seems mad, and Ace has to tell him that sometimes that's the way sad comes out. And then Thomas gets to the big question. Why did he kill himself? And Ace tells him it's because his spirit got broken. Ace then switches the conversation because he knows that to put out the fire, Jack had to use his blanket. So Ace gives him his Georgia Bulldogs blanket. And right before Ace leaves for the night, Thomas tells him, I love you, Uncle Ace. Ace then heads downstairs where his brother is watching some old DWL promos that he wants to turn into digital. One in particular is from his dad's rivalry with Wild Bill. Now, it's pretty cheesy looking, but it is innovative for its time. After the promo's done, though, Ace starts asking his brother a lot of the questions that Thomas just asked him. And Jack has to tell him, you haven't listened to your mom your entire life, but now you're going to start? Ace then changed the conversation to Florida Dystopia's promos because they look movie-like. Ace suggests that they do something like that. Now, at first, Jack says, I didn't call you down here to get notes on creative. But that really pisses off Ace. He tells him, I was with Wild Bill this afternoon. The whole time I'm thinking, do I have to tell Jack about this? Is Jack going to be angry? Like, you're my dad. I mean, why do you have to control everything? And Jack realizes that Ace has got a point. He hands him the notepad and they start getting to work. And what they come up with is an awesome promo that they're going to shoot at a gas station involving a lot of the DWL wrestlers. But mainly it's going to involve Ace and Bobby Pin. It's going to lead up to Jack telling them that they can settle it in the ring and whoever wins gets a shot at the belt. Now all they have to do is wrangle up all the wrestlers. But one old-time wrestler wakes up to bad news. Even though Wild Bill's been telling everybody that he didn't get fired, he wakes up that day to find out he has in fact been fired. It's a pretty tough pill to swallow, and he spends most of the day drinking, floating aimlessly in the pond right behind Willie's house. Now, Bobby started that day heading over to Crystal's because he has most of what he would need for his gimmick. He heads to her bathroom, and as he's getting dressed, he says, by the way, I'm going to tell Jack and Willie that this was your idea. But she doesn't want that because she fears that if Jack and Willie find out that it was her idea, they'll shoot it down. So she says, thanks, but no thanks. I'm a valet. I just got to fly low right now. But Bobby comes out the bathroom and says, dude, I'll respect your wishes, but you are not just a valet. You are super smart and you're really talented. And yeah, the people at the top may not see it, but we do. You're the one that should be getting the push, all right? He then wants her to look at his actual gimmick, and he looks pretty ridiculous. And that's when Crystal realizes that this Bobby 85 thing isn't it. Bobby's gimmick is the fact that Bobby is just a really good guy. That's his gimmick. They both then get the text alerting them to go to the gas station because of the promo. And the promo looks great. Crystal is behind the counter. Ace sneaks up on Bobby Pin, who is just trying to buy some stuff at the convenience store. They end up going through the car wash. It looks awesome. On top of that, Jack actually likes Bobby's new gimmick. The fact that he's just a man of the people. And Ace and Jack have never worked better together. I mean, this whole thing was really spearheaded by Ace. And Jack is liking a lot of the ideas he has. When they finally wrap shooting, Bobby tells him thanks for the opportunity. He says, oh, yeah, no problem. It's fun being the bad guy. And everybody kind of laughs at him because of the temper tantrum that he threw when he had to turn heel. He then, though, asks to talk to Crystal alone. Now, Ace has never been one to apologize, and he doesn't. He just tells her, you did really good today. She tells him, so did you, because you're a great heel. And what Ace has learned is the fact that you just have to separate the guy from the character. He then asks her if she wants to go get something to eat, but she says no, because she actually works at that gas station, and she has to start her shift. So everybody kind of just heads home. That includes Willie, who comes out and sees Wild Bill completely trashed. And it becomes pretty obvious of why he's trashed. It's because he got fired. And right from the get-go, Wild Bill gets pretty contentious. He starts criticizing the fact that they didn't even ask him to be in the promo today, even though he would be the biggest star in it. He even goes so far as to say that Jack is the reason that Tom killed himself. He then goes into Willie, saying that her life isn't so perfect, calling her husband Wiener Ted and saying, what kind of man would let me stay under his roof after he knew that I screwed his wife back in the day? And that daughter that you can't stand? Too bad I wasn't around to pay for that abortion. And that's when Willie just goes off on him, swinging haymakers. But that is the final straw. The next morning when Wild Bill wakes up, all of his stuff is outside near his car, and Willie's husband, Wiener Ted, tells Bill that the motel near the interstate has openings. Wild Bill isn't the only one to start his morning off on the wrong foot, because Ace, who has been trying to kind of make up with Crystal, ends up heading over to her trailer when he's surprised to find that she's on her trampoline hanging out with Bobby Pins. And instead of interrupting the two, Ace decides to key his car and leave. But typical Bobby, he ended up taking it in stride, saying that it looked like a racing stripe. And Ace is completely unaware of the fact that Crystal ended anything before it really began. She told Bobby they really shouldn't be seen in public together because he's in a rivalry with her wrestler. Either way, Ace heads home that night, and his mom can tell that something's wrong with him. And it's not just the stuff with Crystal. Ace turns to his mom and says, you know, Dad checked out because he was messed up on some stuff, but he ain't in hell. I hear the gunshot over and over again. I can't sleep without music. And it's been almost a year. She starts giving him a lecture on sadness being selfish, and he completely rebuffs that. He says to his mom, you stopped smiling way before Dad did what he did to himself. Why? I think maybe if you took the time to answer that question, you may be well on your way to being happy again. Ace ends his night, by the way, sleeping with the bartender and confiding in her about the feelings that he has because he doesn't really have anyone to talk to. Only thing the bartender's concerned with is round 2. The other Spade brother, Jack, is headed to go meet with Wild Bill. He gets a phone call from Stacy, who's gone back home, and she calls him to let him know that she got a job. It's just part-time at the grocery store, but she had talked to Jack's mom about what her life was like when Tom was alive and running the DWL, and that was just something that she wasn't interested in. She didn't feel like she had a purpose. She doesn't know what she wants to do with her life, maybe go back to school, but it's certainly not just sewing costumes for the DWL. To her surprise, Jack says, look, if you want to work, I want you to work. All I care about is that you're happy. Jack then hangs up and heads over to the motel to tell Wild Bill to stop hanging out with Ace, but when he actually sees Wild Bill, he's in such a sad state that Jack just ends up leaving. And it's a pretty good thing, because Wild Bill ends up putting on his wrestling garb again, heading to the roof of this motel, and just screaming his head off and waking up everybody that was sound asleep. In episode 5, the DWL crew is practicing that week's main event. It's going to be a steel cage match between Bobby Pins and Ace. But before they practice the actual finish, Crystal hops on the mic because she wants to show off some of her skills. As she's berating the would-be crowd, Ace says, yeah, I don't like this at all. Crystal's a little downtrodden, but Jack pulls her aside and says, look, now that I know that you can memorize lines like that, I'm going to write for you. You did a good job. But as Ace and Bobby start practicing the ending to the match, Ace continues to be a dick to Bobby for really no reason. And everybody is unaware of the fact that Ace is being a dick because he's convinced that Bobby is moving in on his valet. The main event practice, though, is interrupted when representatives from the Georgia State Fair call Willie and let her know that they're interested in possibly bringing the DWL to the Georgia State Fair, which would bring a lot of eyeballs to the DWL product. This is a really exciting opportunity for Jack. So they're going to send 3 representatives down for that week's show to see if it fits with their brand. Afterwards, Jack gets his exercise in by running home when Wild Bill rolls up. Wild Bill just got done with a very weird press conference where he took absolutely zero responsibility for what happened on the plane, but finished it up with saying, I'm going to rehab. You get the feeling, though, he's not actually going to rehab because the media never follows up on that sort of thing. He's just saying it to save face. But Wild Bill is down on his luck, even though he won't show that. He's tracked Jack down because he tells him, well, while I'm in town, I feel like I could help out. Problem is, Jack didn't really like Wild Bill before he stayed at Willie's. He figured that Wild Bill was poaching Ace. But after the whole incident that happened at Willie's, Willie told Jack, and now Jack really doesn't like him. So Jack makes it clear, you're washed up, no one needs you, stay away from the DWL. He then goes inside because he's going to have to take Thomas that day. It's Stacy's first day at the grocery store, so responsibilities of a child are going to fall on Jack. And Stacy is killing it on her first day. The manager even makes a comment like, geez, you're gunning for my job. So everything's going well until she hears something break in an aisle. And when she goes to investigate it, it's Wild Bill who dropped a pickle jar. And Wild Bill is shocked to see that Stacy Spade is having to work. He makes a comment like money must be tight around the Spade household. And she says, no, Bill, I'm working because I choose to work. That's how our family runs things. But Wild Bill continues his jabs and insults. And eventually Stacy gets sick of it and says when Jack gets the Georgia State Fair, he's going to prove you wrong on this. And this is the first that Wild Bill is hearing about the Georgia State Fair. So he leaves Stacy alone to clean up the mess and starts trying to think of an idea of how he can make this work for him. But as Wild Bill was getting on Stacy's case, the DWL crew had gone back to the Dome to once again go through practice and figure out the schedule. And Crystal is in the balcony with Bobby stressed out because she took her whole paycheck, which was about $100, and put it on the Reds-Cardinals game. And if she wins, she's going to use the money to buy a new outfit. As she's trying to pay attention to the game, Willie yells, hey, where's Ace? And Crystal yells, I don't know where he is. And Willie says, well, you should. You're his valet, so go find him. And that's going to be tough to do because Ace has completely skipped rehearsal. Doesn't really matter. He knows where he's going to be in the show. And before going over that night's card, Jack gets the entire group pumped up, letting them know that reps from the Georgia State Fair are going to be in attendance. After practice wraps up, that's when Ace finally decides to show up. But as he's rolling into the parking lot, he sees Crystal and Bobby hugging. And that's because Crystal just won her bet, so she's just excited that she's got money. Doesn't matter, though. Ace has shown up with a new girl. Well, not technically new. It's the bartender who he had sex with the other night. But he storms into Jack's office and says, this is Trisha, and she's my new valet. So this was completely unexpected. Jack sends Debbie to go find both Bobby and Crystal. And Crystal just got done buying her new outfit, which, I mean, it looks great on her, but it's definitely not worth $109. It's just a cheerleading outfit. She probably could have made that at Goodwill. Doesn't matter, though. She's feeling herself. I respect it. But both Bobby and Crystal are very surprised when they walk in the office and they see Trisha. Although Ace isn't the one to break the news to Crystal. Jack tells her that night, they're going to sign autographs together just like every other night. But then Ace is going to go out to the ring and announce that he found out that she was cheating on him. They're going to set up a little photo shoot with Crystal and Bobby so Ace at least has some proof. And then Trisha will take over as the new valet. And this catches Crystal completely off guard. She is hurt. Ace will then mention how Crystal broke his heart, but lucky for him, he has a big rod, so he has no problem catching fish. That's when Trisha comes out. The plan is then to keep Bobby and Crystal together for a little bit. But Crystal looks over at Ace like, dude, what the hell? And Jack tells her, no, this was my idea, even though it wasn't. As everyone's kind of leaving the room, Crystal pulls Ace aside and says, why didn't you come talk to me about this? And Ace pulls the, it's nothing personal, it's just business line that Crystal doesn't believe at all. She has to get dressed, though, because they need to stage these photos with Willie and Bobby. They head down, and at first, these staged photos are cringeworthy. Willie has to tell Bobby, it needs to make it look like you actually find her attractive. So that's when Crystal starts straddling him and making out with him. And the photos look great, but it definitely wakes up Bobby's pin, if you know what I mean. And while Willie was taking photos of Bobby and Crystal, Jack had to head off with Thomas because before that night's match, he needed to meet with the 3 reps from the Georgia State Fair. And they let him know that none of them are really wrestling people, but data shows that regional wrestling promotions are big in Georgia. They noticed the DWL because of all their promotion on social media. So Jack starts trying to sell it, but it's actually Thomas who sells it the best. He explains to people why folks in Duffy are so invested with it. It's because of the storyline. You end up coming back every week to find out if that bad guy is going to end up seeing the light and becoming a good guy. The Georgia State Fair reps are really impressed with Thomas. This dinner with the Georgia State Fair reps causes Jack to miss the autograph signing, and it's a doozy. You've got Crystal and Ace signing together, but Crystal is throwing jab after jab at Ace to the point where he gets up to go to the bathroom. And then you have Wild Bill show up. actually pay for a ticket, but most of the fans that are there immediately turn their attention to the DWL vet. With Ace in the bathroom, Wild Bill sits right down next to Crystal. Right off the bat, Wild Bill starts complimenting Crystal on her ability to be a valet. Then when one of the fans asks Wild Bill for a picture and hands the phone to Crystal, Wild Bill yells at the fan saying, "She's not taking the picture. She's going to be in it. She's a rising star." Debbie then pulls Wild Bill away from the table because when she saw him, she knew that there was trouble. Jack had told Wild Bill that he wasn't supposed to be there. Debbie found out about it, so she's there to nicely tell him to go away. But Wild Bill tells Debbie, "You've known me since I was a rookie. I mean, what am I really going to do?" So Debbie tells Wild Bill to just stay in the back, make sure that Jack doesn't see him, don't cause a stir. And the crowd there for that show is huge. Most of the wrestlers are pumped about it. All but one. Rooster. Shocking, I know. There's a battle royal that night, and Diego and Rooster are supposed to be the last two men standing, with Diego winning. But when Diego walks in and sees that Rooster's pissed off, he knows why. And honestly, he's just sick of it. He's sick of Rooster whining. So he says, "All right, well, if you want to win the royal so badly, I don't care about it, man. I just want to wrestle. So I'll go over the top rope. I'll say I tripped." Rooster is surprised that Diego is willing to do it, but Diego's point is, what is Jack really going to do? Run out and reverse the call? Yeah, he's going to be pissed off, but if I say I tripped, I tripped. And while Diego was changing the ending to the Battle Royale, Crystal was outside putting her makeup on when Wild Bill once again runs into her. He gives her the suggestion of pulling her hair back when she walks out to the ring because her face is a bigger draw than any of the muscle out there. He says, that's why Ace is so caustic. His valet's getting bigger pops than him. I probably would be too. But she lets him know that the whole valet thing is ending after tonight's show. And Wild Bill can't believe that that's Jack's vision. He says, "Man, that is so short-sighted, protecting the feelings of his man-child brother." In my day, these things weren't so scripted. This league has a little buzz right now because he went off script. Jack was smart. He continued to do a little unscripted stuff. So if you get a feeling, lean into it. If it's not scripted to be your time and you think it should be, then make it your time. Make everybody else react to what you do. And for the first time in her career, Crystal is thinking about going off script. And speaking of that script, Ace is upstairs in Jack's office going over that script on what he's going to say to Crystal. And Ace kind of improvises a little too much. He's planning on calling Crystal a cam girl, amongst other things. Jack has to remind him, you got to ratchet it back, man. We're a family show. If you write what I've written for you, the crowd will turn on her. Willie then comes in the room and lets Ace know that he's going to have to head down and start getting ready because the Battle Royale is going on and they're the next match afterwards. But as they're getting dressed and ready to go out, Crystal notices that Trisha is looking at her. And she says, "Is there something I can help you with?" And Trisha looks her up and down and says, "I was just going to tell you a place you can get your roots done that won't make your hair look so bleached." This is like the third or fourth bitchy thing that Trisha has said to Crystal. So Crystal pushes her. They get into a little bit of a cat fight. Bobby tries to break it up. Ace starts pushing Bobby. The whole thing gets broken up, but Crystal's $109 outfit does end up getting ripped. Willie has to patch it up in the meantime. Crystal is crying, but she has to wipe the tears away because they're up next, and the Battle Royale only has two men standing in it. Now, the original plan is for Diego to win, but he's planning on improvising with Rooster to let Rooster win. But as Rooster is ready to throw him out of the ring, he hears the crowd chanting his name. And he suddenly decides, nah, let's stick with the script. So Diego Cottonmouth ends up reversing it and chucking Rooster over and winning. And the crowd starts booing relentlessly. When Rooster goes back in the locker room, people are congratulating him, but he's got an attitude about him. And when Jack walks up to him, he just turns to Jack and says, "What's my name?" Because he really believes that Jack doesn't know his actual name. So not only does Jack tell him his name, he tells him his nicknames. He understands why Rooster is mad, but he reiterates that his time will come. It's also a big night, so the DWL needs to finish this night, wrap up with the Georgia State Fair people, and then the next day he will go over whatever issues Rooster has with him. This seems to suffice for Rooster, so he's willing to put his issues with Jack aside for at least 24 hours. Now it's time for the main event. Bobby Pins heads out alone, and then Ace heads out with Crystal right behind him. But Crystal has really thought about what Wild Bill has told her. So when Ace grabs the mic and says, "I have something to tell y'all," Crystal grabs it from him and starts completely reversing the script. Instead of her being the bad guy, she ends up belittling Ace, owning up to cheating on him, but saying that it's because she needed a real man. Ace wasn't satisfying her. And the more she talks, the angrier Ace is actually getting. She calls him a whiny crybaby, going back to him crying in the ring with the screw job. And this heel is being laughed at by the crowd, and he's not taking it well. But Crystal does shine with her mic skills. The crowd was supposed to hate Crystal after this. But because it was her that grabbed the mic and her telling her side of the story, they end up loving her for it. It makes Ace's character look really pathetic, and she tells him, by the way, we're through. I'm with Bobby Pins now. Jack tells her to get out of the ring immediately. And right before the match starts, Ace walks up to Jack and says, what the hell was that? But Jack, trying to regain order, just tells him, get to your spot, get ready to start. And when the match starts, Ace goes in on Bobby. I mean, he's actually hitting him. He's going way too rough. Bobby continues taking it in stride, but he's not exactly liking it. At one point, Ace tells him to go to the top of the cage and do a suplex, which is something that Bobby has never done. And Bobby goes through with it, but it definitely hurts. With Bobby writhing on the ground in pain, Ace grabs a leg and goes for a leg lock, and he's actually twisting up Bobby's leg. Bobby is screaming in pain, but Ace isn't letting it go. Even as Bobby taps, Ace isn't letting go. Jack starts screaming at Ace, what the hell are you doing? And Ace takes it so far that he ends up snapping Bobby's leg in half. I'm talking compound fracture. It leaves the crowd stunned. And this includes the people from the Georgia State Fair, who, before this, were having a great time. Luckily, though, they all think that this is scripted. They think that Bobby's injury was fake. They don't realize Bobby actually broke his damn leg. And as Bobby is being wheeled out by the medics, Ace is screaming in the ring. That's what happens when you mess with Ace Spade. As Jack is with Bobby in the back, all of a sudden he hears a familiar face over the sound system, and it's Wild Bill. Wild Bill had gone into the ring and grabbed the mic, and the crowd's going wild, so there's not a lot Jack can do about it. He can't shut it down because all the people there thinks this is a part of the script. Wild Bill starts going in on both Jack and Ace, saying that Tom Spade at least had his respect, but his two sons have driven the DWL into the ground. So he challenges both Spade brothers to a ladder match for the title. And Jack is forced to go out there with the title and say, fine, if you want your shot, you got it. But man, he is pissed off. After the show, most of the wrestlers end up heading to the hospital to wait for Bobby to get out of surgery. And when Ace finally shows up, Jack starts screaming at him, you did the one thing that you cannot do. But Ace starts saying it was an accident, and he's sticking to that story, even though it was totally intentional. Jack ends up grabbing Ace and throwing him against a soda machine and saying, you understand why I made you a heel? It's because you're a piece of shit. But then Ace notices that Thomas has walked into the room and has seen this interaction go down. And Thomas loves his Uncle Ace. So he's pretty mortified to see his dad accosting his uncle in a hospital, especially after everything that happened with the screw job incident. He ends up running away, but Jack doesn't have the time to go after him because Willie ends up handing a phone to him, and it's from the Georgia State Fair people. The good news is they loved it. They've given the DWL the space they need to perform at the fair. But Willie doesn't really care about that at this point. They've got a wrestler going through surgery, and she tells Jack, I know you got a lot on your plate, but your son has no idea what's going on. And he's terrified, so you need to talk to him. In episode 6, Rooster starts his morning off with a meeting with Charlie Gully. Pretty simple. Charlie Gully wants Rooster to jump ship. Rooster's hesitant, though. He just feels like Charlie Gully's giving him a lot of fluff right now, telling him exactly what he wants to hear. He says Jack might be a dictator, but he's good at what he does. And Gully's main message to him is, yeah, well, here's what I know. You should be a star, and you're not. So come work a show with me and just see what the differences are. Charlie has to get going, so he throws $1,000 on the table and walks out. But somehow, Rooster takes this as an insult. So he chases after him and throws it back at him. And Gully, just like me, it was pretty surprised at that kind of response to $1,000 on the table. Because you figure that $1,000 can buy pretty much like the largest mansion in Duffy. But Gully tells him, if you come to work with me, I'll give your money however you want. I'll put it in a manila envelope, and I'll put a little bow around it, and I'll show you the loyalty that you haven't been shown. But don't try this tough guy act with me, all right? You don't need to whip up some imaginary disrespect. You got my number, call me. And a phone call is exactly how Jack starts his morning, but it's not the kind of phone call he wants. It's from the Georgia State Fair people, and they're having an issue, because there's still 10,000 tickets to be sold. And pre-sale isn't trending in the right direction. So Jack needs to think of a way where he can pack that place. But he has a pretty busy morning. He has to meet with Willie to go to the location of where they're wrestling in front of 10,000 people. He also has to do a podcast interview to promote the appearance. And that seems like a pretty busy day because it is. But Jack has completely forgotten that he has baby Shelby's baptism that day. Even though Stacy put it on the calendar, he just decided to ignore it, I guess. Didn't notice it. So somewhere between meeting with Willie and this podcast, he's got to fit in this baptism and barbecue that's held afterwards. And the guy who's doing the podcast with is named Dick Valentino. He's a former wrestler turned podcaster who has a big listener base. So he can't exactly blow him off, especially considering Dick's coming in from Atlanta. Stacy understands and does tell him, do what you got to do, but for the people that love you, you just got to show up on their big days. Being on time helps, but blowing them off doesn't. And this doesn't just mean Jim and Melanie. This also means Stacy, who's going to be performing a song at the baptism. Jack then drives off to meet up with Willie, where they get a tour of the baseball stadium where they'll be performing in. But really, Willie drove all the way out there to obtain an alumni list from a local college. As they're walking down to the field, though, Willie brings up the elephant in the room. Wild Bill. What are they going to do with him? Jack, though, feels like he doesn't have a choice because Bill cut a promo in the ring, and the reaction from the crowd told him all he needed to know. So if there's a way to walk that back, then he's all ears, but he feels like he's in between a rock and a hard place. Willie's concerned, though, that Wild Bill has set a precedent of sneaking in the ring, grabbing the mic, and now running the show. She also posed the question, when was the last time he even wrestled? Probably pretty dangerous. And there's also the bad blood between Willie and Wild Bill after what Wild Bill said about Willie's daughter. She just doesn't want to be anywhere near him. They start getting in a conversation about what Tom Spade would do, but Willie ends up reminding Jack that when the DWL really needed Wild Bill when he was a big star, Wild Bill never came back. Even though Tom Spade needed his help, he just never was there to help out, even for one night. And now that he's down on his luck, he feels like he can just saunter back to the DWL and build up his brand again. She doesn't like that. But Jack looks at it another way. He looks at it as, yeah, Wild Bill left, but he left and he created a name for himself. He's the only wrestler from the DWL to make it big time. So now, let's use him. Let's use his name to build the DWL back up. Doesn't mean he's happy with what Wild Bill did, but he does feel like maybe he can use this for good. Eventually, this conversation ends with Willie saying she's not willing to deal with Wild Bill's crap. The other Spade brother, Ace, is sitting at home before the baptism watching old home movies of his dad, watching him play football as a child, and just glowing about him, saying how Ace Spade was going to be a big star one day. He thinks it's a phone call from Jim, because Ace is supposed to be the godfather for baby Shelby. And Jim is called up to just let him know that he's supposed to make a speech, which Ace didn't quite know was the plan, but Big Jim tells him, you're a wrestler, man, just riff it. Ace is a little concerned after what happened with Bobby in the ring and feels like maybe he shouldn't be giving speeches at this moment, but doesn't seem like he has a choice, so his wording to Jim is just don't expect it to be great. When he hangs up the phone and hears something going on in the basement, and when he goes downstairs, he finds his mother cleaning out his dad's old stuff. And he tells her, you can't get rid of dad's stuff, but she feels like it's taking up more room than it's worth, and she's going to donate it. And Ace just feels like this is another example of his mom trying to get rid of the memory of his dad. So even though she's planning on donating it, he does end up saving some of the items. He then gets ready to head on over to the baptism. And most of the wrestlers have met up at the Dome before the baptism to get dressed. That includes Rooster. He's all dressed up, waiting to go over to the church, when he catches Jack running in. He tries to talk to Jack about the finished lineup for the state fair. But Jack doesn't really have time to talk because he has to get to this podcast with Dick Valentino. So he asks Rooster, can we talk about this at the barbecue? And Rooster's more than willing to hold off on this conversation. When he runs upstairs, though, and puts his suit in the office, he's kind of surprised to see that Wild Bill is waiting for him. Wild Bill asks him, are you going to threaten to beat me up again? And Jack says, no, I'm going to make good on that promise next time, but I have some business to attend to. And Wild Bill already saw Dick Valentino walk in, and Jack says, what did you say to him? Worried that he might have jeopardized whatever goodwill he would have with Dick Valentino, but Wild Bill just made a stupid joke about the fact that it's 2021 and this guy is still going by the name Dick. As Jack is walking to go meet up with Dick, Wild Bill is chasing after him, reminding him that the state fair is only a month away and they have to sell 10,000 tickets for this thing. And Wild Bill feels like the best way to do this is Wild Bill. He tells Jack that fans are blowing up a social media account. Barstool wants to do something with him about his comeback. And he feels like together they can grow the DWL into something beautiful again. But Jack stops him and says, we don't need your help right now. When my dad needed your help, you were never there. But Wild Bill tells him, your dad never asked for help. He couldn't stomach the fact that I got picked and he didn't. And I did try to help. I came back to scout Ace. You don't think there's an Ace in every single state? There's nothing special about him. I gave him a lottery ticket and then you did what you did. Come on, let's put all that crap aside and let's rise up together and make this thing great. Jack asks him, though, after what you did last week, how am I ever supposed to trust you? And Bill says, that was inspired. Without me, there's nothing to talk about. Look, the fact is, there's a year's worth of promotion and prep to put this thing forward. And Jack tells him, I'm promoting it just fine. And Bill says, with Dickie Valentino's podcast? That guy's a snake. Watch your back is all. But Jack tells him there'll be no talking about the state fair until you talk to Willie. And Bill can't believe the issues with Willie are still a thing. Jack then meets up with Dick Valentino. They head to his office to record this podcast. This is supposed to be about the DWL and rising up in the state fair. And it does start out like that, but it's more to do with what's the main event at the state fair and whether or not Wild Bill will be a part of it, which Jack isn't willing to answer. Jack basically just says that everything's on the table right now. And Dick Valentino kind of throws his hands up because he's like, well, we're supposed to promote this state fair, yet what exactly are we promoting? I mean, what's the draw? What's the main event that are going to get people to come out? And Jack tells him, well, I'm the champion, so I'll at least be in the main event. But even though this podcast is supposed to be about talking about the DWL, along with the state fair, Dick Valentino starts talking about the screw job with Ace, and then it goes into Tom Spade killing himself. And that's just a topic that Jack isn't willing to talk about. Even though Dick Valentino tells him that his listeners will be interested in it, Jack isn't. So he walks out of the interview, and he goes to get dressed and head over to the baptism. And the baptism has already started. As Willie was walking in, she was stopped by Crystal because, just like Rooster, Crystal is curious of whether Jack has finalized the show for the state fair. Tells Willie, yeah, I know I'm supposed to talk to Jack, but, I just feel like after what happened with Bobby, I don't really have a place. And Willie's pretty blunt with her, saying, well, I guess you just answered your own question. I mean, whose fault is that? You decided to go off script and ad-lib. Crystal tells her that she never expected Bobby to get hurt, but Willie says, I know we're supposed to stick up for each other because we're women in this hard industry, but you decided you didn't like what was written, so you decided to change it. There's blood on your hands. And by the way, you should know by now we all answer to Jack Spade. So unfortunately for Crystal, if she wants an answer to this, she's going to have to go to Jack because Willie is not helping out. The baptism goes off without a hitch. Stacy's song is great. Ace makes a wonderful speech. Really, the only problem is the fact that Jack showed up late and missed most of it. And that does not sit well with Stacy at all. After the baptism, there's the barbecue. The rest of the DWL has split up a little bit. Crystal and Bobby are sitting down on the couch talking. And after the conversation that she had with Willie, Crystal feels like she is at fault for what happened to Bobby. So she apologizes. But Bobby says, you have nothing to be sorry for. He explains how if you want to get in the ring with the big boys, you got to know the consequences. And she says, no, I shouldn't have lit the match. And Bobby says, no, you shouldn't be a valet. Deep down, you're a wrestler. And Crystal says, well, Jack and Willie don't think so. And Bobby gives her some advice from his mom. You don't have to accept somebody else's view of you. But while those two are talking, the man who broke Bobby's leg is outside with Big Jim. And Big Jim brings up the broken leg, asking, what the hell happened? And Ace's response is, well, he got a broken leg is what happened. And Big Jim's a little taken aback by this because he's known Ace since they were kids. So he says, he's a good dude. Have you apologized to him? And that dude got really messed up. And I know that Jack didn't write that in the script. And Jim is right. So the first chance he gets, Ace tries to help Bobby out. And it's when Bobby's trying to get some food. He starts walking Bobby's food to the table. And that's when he finally apologizes for breaking Bobby's leg. And Bobby takes it just as you would expect Bobby to take it. He says, no worries, man. The two get interrupted by Crystal, and Crystal tells Ace that his speech about the baby was really nice. And this is the first time the trio has talked since Ace broke Bobby's leg, so as you can imagine, it's a little bit awkward. And then there's Rooster, who finally catches up with Jack to talk about the main event, but Jack kind of blows him off, saying, Rooster, I feel like we're having the same conversation every week with you. And Rooster, who suddenly has options, looks at Jack and says, you think that, but no, it's not the same conversation, and walks off. And as he's driving home that night, he calls up Charlie Gully and says, I'm in. So Rooster is leaving the DWL. As the barbecue is winding down, Ace is talking to Big Jim about what his life is now, about this home life, and mainly about the fact that he no longer has wrestling. And Jim tells Ace that what he really misses isn't the wrestling part, it's the guys. But then Ace sees that Crystal is holding the baby, and it's a nice look. So Ace goes over to hold the baby. And Crystal sees Ace in a completely different light. Ace and Crystal end up leaving the house together, and now it's Crystal's time to apologize. She apologized to Ace about ad-libbing and what she said at the match. And Ace apologizes for doing what he did to her. He tells her, you got a real thing going in the ring and in life. It's special, just like you. But Crystal just kind of nods and goes home. When Ace gets home, he ends up popping back in that videotape of his dad saying that Ace was destined for stardom. And he starts to get real emotional, because you can tell he feels like he just failed his father. One person noticeably absent from the barbecue was Willie. She's got a lot of business to attend to at the DWL, and as she's wrapping up that night, leaving the dome, Wild Bill walks in the office. Wild Bill had tried to get in touch with Willie, but she had been blowing off calls and texts, so he had to do this face-to-face. And it takes him about 100 words to say, I'm sorry, but he finally gets there. The fact that he couldn't come right out and say it, though, pisses off Willie. She's still not over what he said. And as Willie is leaving, Wild Bill comes clean with the real reason why he was mean to her. It's because he was in love with her. And he really thought that she loved him. But then one day, she just dropped him, deciding it would be Tom Spade who would end up being the big star. which she was ultimately proven wrong about. But that still hurt Wild Bill tremendously. She tries to explain that Tom was being scouted and it was Tom who actually asked her to be the valet, but he cuts her off and says, "We were all here building something together. And an opportunity came to you and Tom, and you both decided, without me, that it was a better bet you being Tom's valet. You thought I didn't have what it took to go all the way. And that hurt, but then you kicked me out of your bed, and that hurt worse. And then anger just festered inside of me." They both end up apologizing, but the wound is still not healed. As those two were trying to apologize, a fight was brewing in the Spade household between Stacy and Jack. As soon as they got in, Stacy noticed that there were fireflies outside and asked Thomas if he wanted to go outside to catch him for a science project. But Jack didn't follow them and help out. And this is yet another thing that's just been added on to the long list of things that Jack hasn't done. So when Thomas goes to bed, Stacy rips Jack. Because it's not just the fireworks, but it was getting squirrels out of the attic. It was saying that Thomas could get a hamster or a guinea pig or whatever the hell it was when she said no. And it's mainly the fact that she feels like he doesn't listen to her. And maybe Jack doesn't realize it because he's been burning the candle at both ends. But you've got a situation where one man thinks that he's doing what's best for him and his family, and the woman feeling like she's a single mom most of the time. She tells Jack, "We need more than just an exhausted and depleted you. Thomas needs more than an example of a guy burning the candle at both ends. And I need you to actually listen to me. I need to be a voice that you appreciate hearing. I would love to think that when I have an opinion, it's actually valued." So now that that's on the table, let's see if things actually change. When Jack returns for his morning run in episode 7, Crystal is on his front step waiting for him. She tells him that she's wanted to talk to him for a while, but she just keeps losing her nerve. The reason she came over is because she wanted to apologize. Apologize for everything, for going off script, and to let him know how much she truly cares about the DWL. But instead of really accepting her apology, Jack just says, "Thanks for letting me know," and walks right inside. Stacy, who had heard this whole conversation go down, tries to make Crystal feel better by telling her she's a good person and she shouldn't beat herself up, but Crystal's pretty down on herself. Jack then gets a phone call, though, that the DWL dome was trashed. As Charlie Gully sat in his store, him and a couple of cronies were talking about the DWL and how there is legit heat with them. One of Gully's cronies tried to buy a ticket to just heckle them, but the closest he could get was the 40th row. So while they try to play it off like the DWL isn't real competition, it clearly is. So Charlie Gully wanted to send a message. In the middle of the night, he took a helicopter over to the dome and spent all night plastering the outside of it with pictures of DWL wrestlers, but it's as if they were working for Florida Dystopia. The whole mess was found by Apocalypse, Bobby, Diego, and Ace when they showed up at the dome in the morning. As they talk about how Charlie Gully got his money, it's family money, and he came down south and opened up this outdoors kind of store, Jack shows up and sees all the flyers. Even though everybody around him is extremely loyal, he starts kind of re-pitching them a bit to stay, saying that this has happened in the past. Rival wrestling organizations have tried to poach their talent, but it doesn't take too long for that talent to come right back to Duffy. And maybe one of the reasons why he felt the need to kind of pitch these guys to stay is because after Rooster left, they're hard up for talent for the state fair. They're actually holding tryouts soon. So Jack can't afford to lose any more wrestlers, especially some of his top guys like Apocalypse, Diego, and Ace. As Jack heads into the dome, Ace lets him know Wild Bill's inside training. And sure enough, he is. And it's extremely awkward for Willie. But Jack and Ace both head inside to see the old man hitting the ropes. And Wild Bill wants to go down to Florida and exact revenge on Charlie Gully for what he just did to the dome. But Jack doesn't have any interest in that because he still needs to figure out the main event for the biggest main event in DWL history, the main event at the state fair. Normally, Jack would just write it himself, but this time it's going to be a little bit different. He wants a creative discussion on what exactly they should do. It's going to end up being a three-way because Wild Bill ended up forcing their hand, but everything Wild Bill said was correct. Wild Bill being in the main event has helped skyrocket ticket sales, so he's in. Now it's just a matter of what do they do about the main event. And not only has Jack decided to open this up to a discussion, he's also decided to drop the belt. Now the question is, who does he drop the belt to? And that spurns an argument between Wild Bill and Ace. Wild Bill saying that this entire crowd's showing up for him and putting the belt on him would give the biggest pop. Ace, however, making the point that if you put it on Wild Bill, it's the same old, and no one's going to come back, no one's going to care. If you put it on the young upstart, i.e. Ace, people will be invested in that storyline. And not only that, he deserves it. Wild Bill's been gone for so long, and Ace figured he deserved the belt a long time ago. Jack just stands there taking this all in, but the fact that Jack isn't really giving any feedback pisses off Ace, and he ends up storming out. he heads home and he's on Instagram where he sees Rooster at Charlie Gully's party. And yeah, it looks fun. He then notices on that paper that Charlie Gully had glued to the dome with Ace on it, it has an invitation to the party. So Ace hops in his car and he heads down to Florida. And Charlie Gully's place is an absolute mansion. It's also a shrine to him. He walks through all the people and the craziness and he finds Rooster. And Rooster didn't believe that he would actually show up, but Charlie Gully, I guess, said the whole time, no, he'll be here. And after Gully has the biggest douchebag entrance of all time, he ends up seeing Ace. But Ace lets him know, I didn't come here to party. I came here to kick your ass for doing what you did to the dome. Because if you're doing what you did to the dome, then you're doing that to my family. Gully, though, ends up flipping it, blowing smoke all up Ace's ass and telling him, hey, instead of kicking my ass, why don't you just sit here, drink some of my beer, smoke some of my weed, and we'll talk about Ace Spade, the hero, because that's what you are. You're a hero. So Ace ends up cracking open a beer and staying. But later on in the party, when Ace ends up getting Charlie Gully alone, he reiterates that he's not here to party. Although, I guess free beer's free beer. He's there to kick his ass. And Gully tries to explain, but it was a prank. It's a sign of respect, and it got you here, which is the whole goal of the thing. Plus, I already sent a crew of guys down there to clean it all up. So, relax. And the reason Charlie Gully had lured him there is because he wanted to show him his side of things. He knows that Ace has this perception of him, but he wanted to show him that Florida dystopia is functional. It's also fun, but mainly it's the exact opposite of what's going on in the DWL. The two get interrupted when Gully's daughter walks in, and Gully introduces his daughter Lucy to Ace, and Lucy tells him, I know who you are. My dad shows us your matches all the time. You're really talented. And this further proves Gully's point that he is an actual fan of Ace Spade. Gully goes back to pitching Ace on Florida Dystopia. But Ace kind of chuckles and says, you're nervous. We got better athletes, better storylines, and our venue would look better on TV. Dude, we're killing it. The State Fair is sold out because of me, Jack, and Wild Bill. And Gully asks him, are you finally winning the belt at the fair? And Ace tells him that they're finalizing the story. And when Gully says it's wrestling, not Shakespeare, Ace shoots back that you can't just flip-flop on the storylines. But Gully gets the conversation back on track to pitching Ace to the Florida Dystopia way of life. He says, come wrestle with my organization and play the character you are in real life. Strong, cool, captivating, brave. My fans would love you. I'll give you your own merch. You'll make your own money. Get out from under Jack's thumb. Ace, however, tells Gully that he's his brother and he's not going to screw him over like that, but Gully makes the point that Jack has been screwing over Ace for a long time now. He even goes as far to show him a video of Jack and Ace's cartoons. And Jack and Ace are, how do I put this? Well, they're getting it on. The cartoons are getting it on. And Ace is the catcher, and Jack is the pitcher, if you're following along. Very disturbing stuff to Ace. But Gully shows him this to point out this is the way that the world sees you. Getting screwed by Jack. And I'm here to tell you it doesn't have to be that way. So why don't you keep partying with us, stay the night, see what we're all about, and it'll allow you to walk away knowing that you made an informed decision. And Ace stays. Now, while Ace was trying to defend his family's honor, the DWL was holding tryouts because, once again, they need people. And one of the people that shows up is Crystal. She's kind of chilling in the back. She's a little bit nervous when she gets a FaceTime from Bobby Pins telling her, you'll be great. But as soon as they hang up, Apocalypse turns to Bobby and says, and when are you going to let her know that you actually like her? And Bobby just says he'll do it when the time is right. And Apocalypse tells him that girls like that aren't going to be around forever, so speak up. Crystal then shows up a few seconds later and tells Debbie that she's there to try it as a wrestler. And since it's an open tryout, Debbie kind of has to let her wrestle. Now, all of this is going down without Jack. He's not there because Thomas got in a fight at school, so he had to be on dad duty. So he's leaving all of the evaluations up to Willie. And Willie has all the wrestlers get in the ring and start working on their moves and whatnot. One of those wrestlers' entire gimmick is he's the dad. He's wearing a blue button-up, khakis, and he's probably the best one. Other than Crystal, that is. But as they're working out, Wild Bill shows up and gets in the ring. And he starts working with the dad, but he is completely unimpressed. As he's got his back turned, though, Crystal ends up getting in the ring and pushing Bill, and the two get into it. And Bill doesn't take it easy on her, but Crystal doesn't really need him to. She more than holds her own and actually pulls off a Hurricane Rana. It's pretty impressive. It actually makes Debbie question Willie on why they don't have female wrestlers.
And it's a question that Willie doesn't really have an answer to.
Willie ends up calling the practice and heading upstairs to wait for Jack. And Jack and Stacy were dealing with the whole Thomas issue. They sit Thomas down and try to tell him that he can't just go around punching people in the face, even though the kid was a year older and he was the one who instigated it. And Thomas says why. I mean, Dad did it with Uncle Ace. And he's referring to in the hospital after Ace broke Bobby's leg, Jack threw him against a soda machine. Stacy's worried that they might be failing as parents. Maybe the whole DWL thing is a bad influence on Thomas, but Jack, however, doesn't really think it's a big deal. Now, while their son getting into a fight at school is bad news, Stacy did get some good news. As Stacy was working in the grocery store, the Earls came up. They showed a family friend a video of Stacy singing at the baptism, and the family friend was blown away. That family friend ends up owning the state rodeo, and they want Stacy to sing the national anthem. So Stacy's going to be singing on television. It's huge. Jack is thrilled for her, but he does have to get back to the dome to find out how the tryouts went. And when he shows up, Willie tells him about the dad, and immediately Jack says, sign him up, we just need bodies. But then Willie tells him about how good Crystal was, and he is not interested. And it's not so much that he's not interested in a female wrestler, he's not interested in Crystal because of what she did. He puts all of the blame on Crystal, none of it on the guy who actually snapped Bobby's leg, his brother. And Willie defends Crystal. But another reason that Jack doesn't want to hire Crystal is because he doesn't want to put her around Ace before the biggest main event in the DWL's history. And Willie takes offense to that because, in her opinion, Jack had no problem bringing back Wild Bill, even though it was going to upset Willie. But Jack says that Willie's more mentally stronger than his brother. So unfortunately for Crystal, even though she was the best, it's a no. And Willie is tasked with going to her trailer and informing her. And Willie feels really bad about it. She sees Crystal's reaction from afar, and maybe she just feels for Crystal because she never got an opportunity to wrestle, but when she goes home that day, Willie ends up taking her stress out on her family, mainly her daughter, and her husband tries to go and talk to her about it. He knows that something's bothering her. He figures it's the Wild Bill situation, but she doesn't want to talk about it. Even after he presses her on it, she ends up freaking out at him because of it, saying, I don't want to talk about this. But Willie's husband's just concerned for his wife because ever since Wild Bill did come back, her drinking's ticked up a bit. The next day, in Florida, Ace goes to see his first Florida Dystopia show, and he's agreed that he's jumping ship. He's having a blast with Gully. He's banging lines of coke, he's hooking up with women, but there's one thing missing, Crystal. As he's about to hook up with one of the valets, he tells her, can you just leave me alone? I gotta call my mother, she's in the hospital. Completely lying to this girl, when in reality, he FaceTimes Crystal and lets her know, I'm jumping ship, Charlie Gully's announcing it, he's gonna curse Jack, he's gonna curse the DWL, and he's gonna announce he found a new home. The reason he's FaceTiming her is he wants her to come with, but not just as a valet, as a wrestler. He promises that he can talk to Gully and make it happen. Ace's phone is about to die, but before it does, he tells Crystal, you should make it out. You can stay at Gully's mansion, we'll get you a room, but call me tomorrow. But as soon as Crystal hangs up, she heads to Jack's place because she was sincere when she said she cares about the DWL. And she tells Jack exactly where his brother is. Jack, of course, thinks there's a catch, and Crystal says, no, there's no catch. I do care about the DWL, despite how big of an asshole you are. And you are an asshole, but I also care about your brother. So right before Jack goes to handle it, he thanks Crystal and then rushes in the house to grab his jacket and his keys. But his reaction when he comes back in the house has Stacy a little bit concerned, and she asks what's wrong, and he says it's Ace. And when he explains what's going on with Ace, she kind of chuckles thinking it was a true emergency. And Jack tries to explain it is. My biggest rival is poaching my star. I have to go get him. But Stacy wants Jack to stay because they just opened up a bottle of wine, they're having movie night, they're celebrating her rodeo gig, but Jack can't. He's extremely stressed out over the fair, over the ending, and now he's got this to deal with. So he's just trying to keep his promotion together. So he tells Stacy and Thomas, don't wait up for me. And he heads out the door to head to Florida. But as he's driving to Florida, Stacy goes in the bathroom and notices that there's a bunch of packets of tissues. And they resemble the same packets that were thrown at Ace. She had always been amazed that somebody actually paid money and handed them out to troll Ace a couple of shows ago. But now she's thinking that sicko might have actually been her husband. So she piles Thomas into the car and heads to her job, where he goes to the manager and he looks it up, and sure enough, she finds out that it was Jack Spade who had bought all those packets of tissues and handed out. But as she's finding this out, Jack is sneaking into the Florida Dystopia show. And the main event just wrapped up. Rooster got the belt. Backstage, Ace is watching this all go down, and he's happy for his friend. He feels like he deserves it. But Charlie Gully walks up and says, next week it's going to be yours. And Ace kind of looks at him and says, well, it doesn't have to be. I mean, we should probably build it up a little bit, right? Let him keep the belt for a bit. And Gully tells him, Rooster was the bait. You're the fish. But this is kind of an example of what Ace was telling him in the mansion. You can't just throw away storylines like this. Gully, though, heads out to the ring to announce Ace, and Rooster heads in the back with his new belt. Gully's out there hyping up the crowd, and most of the crowd know that Ace is in the building. They're just waiting for him to make his announcement. But as Gully is standing in the ring hyping this up, Jack jumps in the ring, taking off his jacket and his hat. And it takes Gully by surprise, but like a pure promoter, he rolls with it. He goes to shake Jack's hand, but Jack lays him out, punching him in the face a few times and saying, "Don't come for my shit." And then right before he's about to leave, he sees Ace and Rooster watching this happen from the back, and he just stares at them. And finally, episode 8 picks up right where episode 7 left off. Gully screams, "Somebody get him," so it forces Jack to get the hell out of there. And Ace actually ends up helping him out. Both Spade brothers are able to flee and get out of there before they get their ass kicked. As soon as they get down the road, Ace starts pleading his case to Jack that he was actually heading there to defend the DWL. But after getting there, he heard Gully out, and he's pretty persuasive. And on top of that, he actually listened to Ace, which is something that Jack doesn't do. Jack tells him, "You're winning the belt at the state fair." And Ace screams, "It's not about the belt." And Jack says, "I know, it's about turning you back into a face," which is what Ace wanted to be all along. Ace says, "Don't do this because somebody tried to steal your stud horse." And Jack says, "I didn't do this because somebody tried to steal my stud horse. I did this to protect my brother from somebody who just wanted to use him." The conversation then goes into how Ace was humiliated in front of all of Duffy. So who was Jack trying to protect then? And Jack says, "Yourself. I didn't think you were ready for the big time." Ace then asks him, "Did you and Willie plant the Kleenexes in the crowd that night?" And Jack says, "Screw you, man. How dare you ask me that question?" They both then drive back to Duffy. When Jack finally gets home, he finds an empty house, and there's a note next to a bunch of tissue packets that say, "Went to Courtney's." The next day, before practice, Wild Bill heads to the trailer park to visit with Crystal, and he showed up because he wants Crystal to be his valet. He's got this famous valet named Bunny Bombshell, and he wants Crystal to take the place. Crystal tells him that she wasn't going to wrestle for the DWL anymore. She quit or was fired. She doesn't really have any interest in it, but Wild Bill convinces her that she really should reconsider. It's one of those situations where she ponders it, but deep down she knows she's coming back. And Bill isn't the only person trying to convince a former DWL employee to come back, because Ace is doing the same thing with Big Jim. He lays out the entire game plan for the triple threat ladder match for the championship and about how he's going to win it. And Jim is excited for him, but he doesn't have any interest in coming back and wrestling. That chapter in his life is done. Now that Ace is going to be a face again, though, he knows that he needs to make amends with some people that he hurt. Namely, the girl at the convenience store. Ace apologizes for everything he did, but she doesn't accept because Ace is an asshole. He asks her if she's coming to the state fair, and she says, "No, it's sold out. Do you have any extra tickets?" And Ace asks her, "Well, if I get you some, will you forgive me?" Ace, though, is getting some pressure from the guy behind him to hurry up, so Ace says, "I'll figure this out, but thank you for considering my apology." The thing is, she's not considering it at all. This just is another step in Ace Spade's reclamation project. Ace then heads to practice, where word of what went down in Florida had spread through the locker room. But Ace, Wild Bill, and Jack have bigger fish to fry because they need to practice the main event. After practice, everybody kind of does their recovery thing, and Wild Bill goes into a cold tub. Diego shows up with some medicine, a.k.a. some pills that he got that could help with bumps and bruises and whatnot, but Wild Bill tells him, "I need something stronger than this." And the stuff that Wild Bill wants, Diego doesn't really want to get because it's really dangerous stuff. It can make you see stuff, feel funny, and it really messes with your stomach. Wild Bill, though, reiterates, "Just get me what you can get me." But Jack didn't stick around that day because he headed home. While wrestling and the state fair are a nice distraction for him, he's still got the issue of Stacy. She still hasn't returned home, and he's trying to get a hold of her, but to no luck. She's just really upset about what he did to his brother. And she has no idea that Ace has gotten over it. In fact, he's really excited about winning the belt. He tells his mom and asks her if she wants to come, but she doesn't have any interest. She saw what wrestling did to her husband, and while she's excited for her son, she doesn't want to be there. But finally, Jack is able to get Stacy to meet with him. She starts ripping him for what he did to his brother, and finally, Jack kind of reaches a breaking point and starts telling Stacy what a bad guy Ace has been, using examples like making the girl at the convenience store cry, telling him that he would stick around Duffy so long until he killed himself like his dad. None of this Stacy had any idea about. Jack tells Stacy Ace is immature. He says stupid things, he's a stupid kid, and he wasn't ready for the show. And the reason you didn't know about it is because I was protecting him from people like you who see him as one thing. You see, I have somebody like you who grounds me in conversation. Ace doesn't have that. So if I have to be my brother's keeper, then so be it. I will. Now with some clarity, Stacy's opinion has changed a little bit, but she does think that Jack should come clean about what he did to Ace. Be honest with him and say that it was him who put the tissues out there. Jack, though, doesn't want to do that because he knows that Ace will hate him. But Stacy says maybe not, but it's better than lying. How you act is who you are, and I'm not in our home right now because I need you to witness the fact that I'm worried that you think the success of the DWL or whatever you achieve equals you being a good guy, and I'm certainly not attracted to that person. If you don't fix who you're becoming, you're going to lose me. Jack understands but asks Stacy, can we go home now? She says no, you got a big few days ahead of you. We'll stay out of your hair so you can focus on that. He then asks if she's still planning on coming to the fair, expecting a yes, but actually, no. The national anthem at the rodeo's time changed, so she can't. And that's pretty upsetting to Jack. He wanted to be there for his wife, but Stacy says, you can be there for me by wishing me luck. Jack then wishes her luck and goes in and says goodnight to Thomas. A couple days later is fair day. Everybody is to meet at the DWL Dome and then head off to the state fair together. But before Ace heads off, he stops by that convenience store and hands the clerk 2 tickets, reiterating how sorry he is for how he treated her. Ace then heads to the Dome, and everybody's really excited. Not just for the day, but Crystal's back. She's decided to take the gig as Bunny Bombshell. Problem is, no one told Jack, and Jack doesn't really have a problem with it, and Ace is thrilled with it, so it's not going to distract him. Him and Crystal are good, so Jack walks over to Crystal and welcomes her back. Ace then pulls Jack to the side because he got a text from Stacy saying good luck, and that indicates that she's not going to be there. So he asks his brother, hey, is everything okay? But Jack just kind of brushes it to the side saying, let's just go kick ass today. Right before the group takes off, though, there's one last person that shows up. Big Jim. He can't miss this opportunity. The group then heads off to the state fair, and when they get there, they are completely wide-eyed. None of them have ever performed in a place this big with this many fans. They're extremely excited. In the back, when everybody gets dressed, Jack addresses the wrestlers and gives them a speech about family and about what the DWL means to them and this moment that they have in front of them. The show then kicks off, and in the ring, the wrestlers are killing it, and the crowd is eating it up. They love it. But in the back, Jack, Ace, Wild Bill, they're all getting ready in the back for the main event. They're coming up next, and Wild Bill ends up getting some stuff and taking it. Immediately feeling some effects. His head's pretty woozy. But he gets it together, and he heads to the back and just watches the rest of the matches on the monitor. Crystal is also getting ready, and she stops the original Bunny Bombshell, Willie, and thanks her for kind of coming to her aid and defending her. And Willie tells her that she's sorry that it isn't wrestling. And also that Willie once said she didn't belong here, and Willie was wrong. The second to last match ends, and now it's main event time. Ace, Wild Bill, and Crystal are waiting to go out, but Jack is noticeably absent. Willie has to go grab him, and that's because Jack is watching the rodeo and waiting for Stacy to sing. Problem is, it's too late. He has to go out. He's going to end up missing it. And she gets up there and, look, I mean, the girl can sing. She kills it. But missing her song ends up making Jack think about what she said about telling Ace the truth. And he tries to, but Ace cuts him off and tells him he did a really good job with the state fair, and this is something that Dad would really be proud of. Kind of shuts Jack up. He doesn't end up telling Ace the truth. Wild Bill is the first one to go out with Crystal, and he grabs the mic and cuts a promo about how he loves the Georgia State Fair and he's sick of the Spade brothers. It goes over great. Jack goes out, immediately gets booed. He's the heel, and when Ace comes out, he also gets booed because he's also a heel. But then as soon as the match kicks off, Jack's plan to turn Ace into a face again goes into effect, with Jack and Wild Bill teaming up together to kick the crap out of Ace. It works. Immediately, the fans start booing both Wild Bill and Jack and getting on Ace's side. Gets to the point in the match where Wild Bill is supposed to start going up the ladder and Ace pushes him off, and he does that. But when Wild Bill goes to get up, well, the stuff that he took, let's just say Diego warned him. He ends up crapping himself, like a lot, to the point where if he gets up, it'll be noticeable. Crystal comes over to see what's up, and he tells her, honey, I gotta play dead. If I get up, I'm never gonna live this down. Jack comes over and gets the lowdown on what's up with Wild Bill, as does Bobby, who is acting as the referee for the match. So Jack informs Ace about Wild Bill's issue, we'll call it, and now it's just down to Jack and Ace. But this match is coming to the end, and there's a couple of people in the crowd that probably shouldn't be there. It's Charlie Gully and his crew. They weren't just going to let what happened last week slide. They had to get retribution. They're not going to do what Jack did, though. They're not planning on just jumping into the ring and attacking them. No, they've actually thought this out, and it's pretty smart. At the point of the match where Jack and Ace are both climbing up the ladder to get the belt, Charlie Gully starts yelling, Jack, 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 and the crowd follows suit. which they weren't supposed to do. They were supposed to be cheering for Ace, and it really confuses Ace. But then they pull out packets of tissues because they've come prepared and they handed out tissues, and they tell the crowd to start pelting both wrestlers with the packets of tissues. And this is something that no one expected. Both guys are at the very top of the ladder. They could easily grab the belt, but they've got tissues being thrown at their face. And Ace asks Jack, "Did you do this?" And this is when Jack admits, "No, not this time, but the first time I did." And Ace punches him, for real, right off of the ladder, taking the entire crowd by surprise. He slides down the ladder, not even caring about the belt, and just goes into attacking his brother. This is playing out just like Charlie Gully wanted. It's a complete disaster. Bobby asks Willie, "What should I do? These guys are legitimately fighting," but she tells him to just wait, see how it plays out. Ace has Jack in mount and is choking him, ready to just punch his lights out, as Jack is apologizing to him, when all of a sudden Ace hears somebody yell his name, and when he turns around, it's Crystal in the ring, and the crowd is going nuts. She takes off her ears and says, "All right, let's go." So Ace gets up and the two start wrestling, and it looks great. Crystal Hurricane Rana's Ace, but Jack is still pretty banged up from a legit fight. So he tells Crystal, "You're going to have to help me out." And she says, "All right, I'll suplex you." And she does it perfectly. Now both Spade brothers are down and pretty much out, at least as far as the audience is concerned. And that's when Jack instructs Bobby, "Get her the ladder." Charlie Gully, though, sees what's going on, and he can't let this happen. So he says, "Screw this. I'm going to go get that belt." And as Crystal is trying to make her way up the ladder, Charlie Gully makes his way to the ring. But Wild Bill ends up seeing him. And shitting his pants and all, he gets up and clotheslines Charlie Gully before he can even get anywhere near Crystal. Crystal then climbs to the top, grabs the belt, and becomes the first ever woman to hold the DWL belt. The crowd is going nuts. And while Ace is happy for Crystal, he is not over what Jack did to him. And that is how Season 1 of Heels ends. Thank you so much for getting to this point of the recap. I really appreciate it. Consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. You don't have to leave a nasty comment. That's not a prerequisite, because nasty comments make me feel bad. Kind of like Ace. I like being a face, not so much a heel. I do have merch, so go buy, like, I don't know, a mug or something. You know, I got bills to pay. And if you know someone that needs this recap, consider sharing it on your social media pages. I would appreciate it. Once again, thank you so much for checking this out.